Hello, everyone, and I want to thank you for enjoying hopefully enjoying what we're going to be telling you and joining us today as we talk about MessageWorks, one of the 3 tools that's in the Health CommWorks suite. Before we get started, I want to cover a couple of ground rules. Everything goes better if you have your audio muted, so if you could please check on that and make sure that we don't hear any feedback so that way everyone can listen in very clearly. That would be great. Secondly, I'm sure you're going to have some questions either during the presentation or afterwards, and how we're going to handle that is by asking you to use the question field that's provided in your GoToWebinar panel. And based on the image you see right here, there's this little red arrow, if it's collapsed, that allows you to get back these options that are highlighted here. And you see the questions are circled. If you type that in at the end of the presentation, both Dr. Keller and I will go through those and make sure we answer them in as many as we can. And to get a feel for who's with us on the line, I'm going to run a couple of polls, and we're going to have one more poll after we run a couple in the middle of this presentation just to make sure people are still cool. And to start it off, we're going to ask the following question. Let's see. Which is, what is your work setting? You guys are great, doing good participation here. Got 87% so far. Okay, I'm seeing it kind of taper off, so I'm going to close it in a few seconds and show you guys the results. Okay, and as you can see, that the majority of the people online work in either a state, national, or local health agency, but we do have some good presentation from nonprofit industry, and we have some individuals representing universities, healthcare centers, or hospitals, or private industry, which is great because what you'll find is that MessageWorks, because it deals with health behavior messages broadly, has a wide application. So universities can use it as a teaching tool, state health agencies, if you're on the local level, can use it to develop messages, as can national, but national and state level individuals often will find that they can help promote it to the local groups that are in contact with the audiences that are really going to benefit. So there's quite a bit of spread on what you can expect from this tool, so we're happy that we have that wide audience. And the second poll, which I want to launch, is just a little bit more about what you do. And so we're going to ask this question. Okay, we're almost there. I don't know if anybody else is waiting to vote. Great. Okay, good. So we got about 88% voted, which is wonderful. I'm going to close it in a few seconds and show you guys the results. Okay. So as you can see, we have plenty of health communicators on, which is wonderful, but I'm also really excited to see the rest of the spread. Researchers definitely play a part in taking this tool and making it better, applying it to different studies that you might be conducting to help evaluate a communication campaign. Healthcare providers, I'm really glad that we have some on there. Being a nurse myself, I know that it's always a challenge to communicate effectively, and if there is a tool out there that can help improve that process, it's one that's well received. So glad you're there. Advocacy and outreach is great too, and I'll be looking forward to getting your experience chimed in through the questions or comments that we get through this presentation. So thank you all for being here. Okay, well, you've responded to the poll, so you're alive and well, which is great. And we can continue on with the presentation. Before we hit into MessageWorks, I want to give you a background on the parent project, which is healthcommworks.com. It's a website, and it contains 3 major tools that were the brainchild of Dr. Galen from the Division of Cancer Prevention and Control. He came to us over at Horizon and said, we really need to develop 3 types of tools because there's an apparent need in at least adding some sort of either expert opinion or evidence-based process to how we engage in health communication. And so if any of you have used the CDC Synergy tool, you'll know that such tools can be very helpful for informing how we go about engaging in effective health communication. And these tools are in a similar vein. The first one, which is why you're here, is MessageWorks, and that deals with how you craft and defend an effective message. So how do you use what research has noticed in the past to improve the messages that you're working on today, to increase their ability to affect health behavioral intent and health behavior action, and hopefully work with other individuals to make it relevant for your audience. So that's what MessageWorks deals with. SocialWorks is going to be coming out at the end of this month, so we're busily working away on that, and its goal is to help you with your social media strategy. Given a particular campaign scenario, certain budget, certain time frame, certain population, what are the tools, what are the channels that would be most relevant for the types of content that you're considering? And so if you're not familiar with social media or how it might fit within a communication campaign, SocialWorks will be your good strategy for building an effective campaign, at least getting it off the ground with a bang. ProofWorks, the third tool, looks at evaluation of a communication campaign. So given the hard work you're doing, you're going to want to demonstrate an impact. And there's many different designs, many different metrics you could choose, but we have some top-notch experts looking at how do we guide you through the process of navigating all those options so that you can reach an effective plan for demonstrating your impact. So whether it's messages, whether it's social media, whether it's evaluation, HealthCommWorks has something for all of those needs. ProofWorks is going to be available in the spring of 2013, so within a year all these will be available to you, and we're really excited to see what you do with them. Again, the website that you're going to want to go to at least check in, which I'm sure you've seen so far, is HealthCommWorks. We have it listed up there. All of these tools are free. All of these tools are meant to be distributed, so if you have somebody that you want to share this with, hit the send button. We will be more than happy to talk with them if you want to connect them with us. And we are very happy to be able to offer these tools to anybody who wants to improve their communication strategy. And that gets to this slide here, which is who will use MessageWorks. And from the start of these tools, the goal was to make research and expert guidance accessible, not only to you, but to our state and local partners and the people that we work with day in and day out to make a better society, to make a better community. So what we've done is gone through testing, and we've gone through usability testing to make sure that this content is not only accurate but accessible, and in the case of research that it's translated effectively so that you don't have to understand the studies in depth to make sure you get the benefit out of what they might recommend. So whether it's yourself working on it or someone else who might benefit from a more research-based or expert-guided process, MessageWorks is one of the tools out of the three that will be very helpful for you. And what I'm going to do now is introduce our rock star guest speaker, Dr. Punam Keller. She is the Charles Henry Jones Third Century Professor of Management within the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, and she's also adjunct faculty at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. She's the co-author of the research algorithm that we use within MessageWorks, and she's all around a great person and a wonderful advocate of improved communication. So, Punam Keller, thank you so much for being here. Also, we have, there you are, great.
Go ahead.
Cool. The other person is indeed myself. I'm a health education specialist at Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, also known as ORISE. But before that, I was a public health nurse for 3 years, working at the local level, local health department. And more recently, I just completed a MSPH in health policy and management over at UNC Chapel Hill, and focused a little bit in innovation and the translation of research into practice. So this is something that really excites me because I see how relevant and important it is, not only for communicators, but for people who are just in my shoes where they're going through school and they need something to guide their process of understanding message tactics and how you communicate. So how this is going to play out is Dr. Keller is going to go over the concepts of MessageWorks, what's behind the tool and how should you think of it, for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to ask that poll. And then I'm going to jump in and we're going to go through the tool together and then get to your questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Keller and take it away.
Thank you again. Hello, everyone. I am happy to have this opportunity to share MessageWorks with you. I feel very fortunate as a researcher that my tool was selected as the engine for MessageWorks. And I hope that this is just the start of multiple future collaborations with the participants in this webinar. Next, please. typically get is what is the message in MessageWorks? And I saw that there were a very large percentage of health communicators on the webinar today. And it's not a vacuous question. It's an important question, and we thought we would start with that. The data that we have has all kinds of messages in it, text messages, messages that have visuals, messages that have some audio, and a combination of different media vehicles. Some of them are in print, some of them moving pictures, as well as audio only. And of course, we also have some data that look at combination of media. So that's the first part. So really, what we're hoping, that you will think of MessageWorks across different message platforms. Now, the other question we often get is, well, we'll just use this algorithm and it's just going to solve all our problems. We don't really need a creative team or maybe an ad agency if you're using it, or really don't have to provide much input because the tool does all the work for you. And as you'll find out pretty soon, that is not the case. If you look on the right side of your screen with those two circles and the star that says message tactics and message content, I just want to upfront tell you that MessageWorks will provide some guidelines on how to make your message more effective. For example, you may say, focus on the social consequences of poor health rather than just the physical consequences of poor health. But it's not going to tell you which social consequences. As we all know, social consequences can be manifested in a variety of different ways. Who is the target? Should we talk about the consequences on your family, or social consequences as an inability to go out with your friends or your coworkers? So there's different elements here that would all fit into that social consequence recommendation, and that's something that we hope your experience and your empirical evidence will provide guidelines on what the exact content of the message should be. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. MessageWorks will help you with the tactics, but not the precise message content. The three main things that MessageWorks was designed to do, and again, I cannot take credit for any of these. As I said, I only provided the little engine, and the ORISE team, along with the CDC team, is responsible for creating these three objectives and making sure that we deliver on them. I would like you to remember three words: improve, collaborate, and defend. And let me talk about each one in a little more detail. Improve message relevance and impact really has to do with the absence of a tool that helps us, A, identify which is the best message, and B, identify ways to improve that message. And if you'd like to add to that multiple messages and multiple audiences, how do you figure out which one goes where? If you have multiple messages and one audience, the tool will help you pick the best message for that audience. If you have one message and multiple audiences, the tool will help you figure out which audience will give you the best return on investment because they have the highest score. So that's the first part. And then, of course, we also give you some recommendations for how to improve your message score or the impact of your message before you go out and actually spend money on implementing this message. We are going to encourage you to test whether that score did indeed, whether the model was predictive or you didn't actually get the score once you implemented it in your target audience. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Collaborate. This is one of the nicest things about this tool. It allows you to not only share, but also showcase. So you share it within your team. You can share it in a larger community, in a forum, if you so choose. And that, of course, allows you to leverage both ways. You can provide your expertise to other people in the same area. If you're all working on HIV/AIDS, or you're all working on reducing blood pressure. I just read again the article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about how 1 out of 3 Americans have problems with their blood pressure. Big problems, and you can find other people around the country, if not globally, who are working on that. And this is a very nice feature of this tool. And also, as I said earlier, you can showcase it. You can say, look, I have done this. We just got data. We did a wonderful job, and I would like to share this. Of course, it's up to you, but we hope you will share your wonderful messages and also possibly your wonderful data that explains how you tested it and how you measured your results. Fabulous. The third part has to do with the defending your message, and we're all, pretty much almost all of us are in the situation where somebody turns around and asks us, okay, we see the art, but where's the science? And I'll describe how the engine for MessageWorks was developed in the next couple of slides, but this allows you to add the science to it and says, look, you know, over 40 years of research with over 20,000 participants across disease states, across multiple message tactics, and, you know, we have chosen to go in this particular direction based on this scientific evidence. And it makes it a little bit easier to defend your message. And also, you know, you're accountable. There's an objective metric, and, you know, you can justify this or justify a funding mechanism or a higher budget for saying, look, this message is going to work really well in this audience, or vice versa. You know, for this audience, we need a separate message. We can't use the same message across audiences, and we need the budget for that. So those are just different ways of using MessageWorks. Next, please. So now to just briefly describe this algorithm, my co-author Lehmann and I did a meta-analysis from 4 literatures: communication, health, psychology, and marketing/consumer research. Found 60 studies that met our criteria. We were very interested in isolating the effect of specific message tactics, because that was our goal, on either intentions to change health behavior or self-reports on changed health behaviors. And we identified 22 communication tactics, 6 individual characteristics, and that actually is the larger model. We reduced this to a more efficient predictive model, and you're going to see that in a minute on the next slide. But 40 years plus of research, you know, we published a paper a few years ago, and we're hoping that one of the advantages of this website, the more people use it, the more motivated we will be to keep updating that. But as we get more data every year, more publications, more evidence from field and lab studies, I think the more rigorous our science is going to be when we update the model. But that was a kind of an ugly model. You can see the picture on the left-hand side. And I have to give all the credit to the CDC and ORISE team for making it this efficient engine that you will see when Matthew does his part of the presentation. And there were a lot of other people who helped us design this beautiful user-friendly card that you see. We had an expert panel, actually several panels, both from external and internal to CDC, who provided a lot of feedback on the internal and external validity of the model. Who should use it, how it should be used, what comes first, what comes next, what would you know, help us take it to the next step, as well as make it much easier for people to code the information they have for an existing ad, or what would make it easy for them to create a new health message. The result is that we have what we believe is a tool that's intuitive, easy to understand and navigate, and I hope you feel the same way after Matthew has finished showing you how the tool works. Next, please. So we started a few years before this. As we all know, if you want to work on a large project, something that has impact, something that is involves the government, you have to be very, very patient. And I must say we were kind of patient, for at least for academics, we were pretty patient. And so I think what you'll see is this is a pretty ongoing project, and we've learned a lot and are hoping to continue learning. And I speak of both on behalf of Lehmann and myself. And I've actually picked up the phone. We just got a comment that I wasn't as clear, so hopefully this is clearer. Sorry about that. I'd like you to look on the right side of your screen where it says 10 variables, and this is the reduced form of the model. This is the predictive model of the algorithm we're using. We have 4 individual differences: age, gender, and race, pretty self-explanatory. And regulatory focus, which is, is your audience pretty much motivated by prevention focus or prevention goals such as safety and security, by promotion goals such as growth and accomplishment, or a combination of the two? And that's one of the choices that you will have when you see the tool for determining your target audience characteristics. Then we have a health core variable that has two parts. Are you encouraging a healthy behavior, discouraging an unhealthy behavior, as well as whether the behavior is prevention, detection, treatment, or some combination, and you'll see that is also an option in the tool. The rest of the variables are familiar to most of you, especially if you work on health communications. They're different tactics. Gain and loss framing, are you focusing on the benefits of engaging in a behavior, the cost of not engaging in a behavior, and combinations thereof? Physical versus social consequences, something I alluded to earlier. How much emotion is in your health communication message, and it's positive and negative emotions. Referencing relates to self versus other referencing. Are you focused on the effect of one person's poor health on themselves or one person's poor health on their significant others? And vividness has to do with how imageable, memorable, concrete, tangible are the specific recommended health behaviors. So those are the 10 variables. Very quickly, we had a much, much larger model, and these are the 10 variables that remain significant after accounting for the variance explained by all of those other models on the dependent measure intentions to change health behavior in the right direction. So that's the basic reduced form of the model. Next, please. As you can see, one of the nice things about MessageWorks and the model, because it's a predictive model, it gets translated into a message score. And the message score, the intention scores, are from 1 to 100, and the estimated behavior scores, no surprise, are much smaller than that. There's another formula that is used to convert intention scores into behavior scores. As you can well imagine, this takes into account things like very strong intention scores. So if you have a score of intention scale of 1 to 5, where 3 is, neither strong nor weak, and 1 is no intentions whatsoever, and 5 is very strong intentions, your 5 scores are more likely to be converted into behavior scores as compared to 4s and 3s and so on. So that's an algorithm that we use. And then these intention scores and behavior scores, as you go through the process, are also accompanied by what we call, next slide please, recommendations for how to improve your score. And each of these variables, as you go through and plug in your information, will give you some recommendations. Depending on your target audience, you will get different recommendations. So if you may have used a gain frame where you're focusing on the benefits of engaging in a healthy behavior, it may come back and say you might want to consider a loss frame to improve your score. You can see at the very bottom of your screen in blue it says learn more about framing, and I've tried to do my best to briefly represent the literature in these different fields on how that framing is defined and some of the studies on framing. And we also have other additional tutorials that include flashcards and videos. So I hope you will find those useful. Please ignore the way I look, okay? I want you to just look away and just listen. I hate looking at myself in the mirror, and the video is just horrifying. But I'm not going to think about that now. It would just freeze me. Next, please. So I'm at the end of my section of this webinar. I want to mention some of the big highlights of using MessageWorks, but also more importantly, some of the limitations. Please remember, MessageWorks is based on data that was used to design and to change health behavior specifically. So if you have an awareness campaign, you can use that because it has a predicted intention score and a behavior score, and that's going to be very difficult to interpret in that situation. Some of you may be working on behaviors that aren't directly health behaviors but are linked to health behaviors, and I do lots of things that are related to health and wealth personal finance and personal health planning. We can have additional conversations. If you're interested, just shoot me an email. But you can see that, that health behavior score, again, might be something we might want to tweak a little bit or reduce specifically if it's not related to a direct health behavior. Definitely use the tool alongside other tools. Every tool has its biases, and the more convergence you can get, you might pick one ad out of your 3 ads if you're working on a campaign. You can then use the tool and say, hey, were my priors confirmed? If not, what assumptions might I have made that are different from some of the assumptions in this model? The assumptions could be related to your target audience. The assumptions could be related to which message tactics are more or less effective for that target audience. So I think it's definitely a collaborative process, and I hope that you feel the same way. The third point is I feel models are models. They're not substitutes for thinking, and you may have a lot more information about your target audiences that aren't captured in those individual differences. And if you just see this as one input rather than the only input, that would make me as an academic and a researcher much more comfortable. And lastly, coming full circle, we're looking at message tactics here. MessageWorks provides specific guidance on things like which kind of frame to use or what kind of consequences or type of referencing, emotion, etc. But it's not going to tell you exactly how to implement that. And I'm looking forward to getting some feedback on which implementations or content you felt were most effective for your particular project goals. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Punam. I appreciate that, and we're looking forward. If you have any questions about Dr. Keller's part, if you could put it in the question field, and we'll get to it after we're done with the tool demo, that would be great. So without going too much further, I'm going to get off of this, and I'm going to actually launch a poll for you guys, especially for the health communicators out there. This might be particularly relevant, which is how many of you have actually had a proposed message which was challenged or debated among your team where you basically had to defend it? Okay, I'm going to give a few more seconds to let everybody make their selection, and then I'll close it off. Okay, so we had about 80% voting, and let's see, I'm going to make sure you can see that. Good. There it is. And this is pretty consistent with what I've found in other webinars that we've hosted. Anywhere between 3/4 or 2/3 of the audience usually has had a situation where a message that they've created has been challenged in some way. And why I like asking that question is because what I've seen is that research often is one way to increase the ability of a person to defend the message. If you can show that things have worked well in the past, well then, and that those findings are translatable into your current situation, well then that's something that helps you argue for your position. And especially with some of the individuals I talked to, the changes that were made to these recommended messages weren't necessarily in the population's best interest. The decisions you as communicators make are often based on formative research, on dialogue with the people you're trying to participate with. And so sometimes these are opinions that try to affect what the results of that hard work is. And so MessageWorks is one tool out of many that might be able to help you build your defense against some of the opinions that are out there that might challenge the hard work that you're doing. So for at least 3/4 of you, it sounds like that might be a relevant situation. For the 24%, hopefully that will not happen to you. So what I'm showing you right now is the HealthCommWorks webpage, and this screen looks familiar because we just recently got into the discussion on what those 3 tools were at the beginning of this presentation. But when you're here, you would have gone to healthcommworks.com, and you're going to be clicking on this CDC MessageWorks link right there. And when you do, it's going to take you to a screen that looks like this, which is the sign-in page. And what you'll be asked to do is enter in the email and password that you already created when you signed up, which is this link down here. Now, before I go on to the actual tool, I just want to mention when you do go and sign up that we take all of the information that you put onto this website very seriously, and we keep it very secure. But for us to do that, we have a pretty stringent password protection program. So when you click the sign up button, you're going to be taken to the registration page, which looks like this. And you're going to notice that there's a list of requirements that your password must meet. What I want to at least demonstrate is that when you start typing in something, that some of these buttons are going to start turning into little check marks down here. And so your goal is to get all those check marks into the green zone, which is definitely more stringent than most passwords. I think the only person who really screamed in the light when they saw this was my wife, and she's a computer programmer who knows about security, so she thought this was great because it definitely makes things more secure. But for we who have to think of these passwords, it can be a challenge, so I just would recommend keep plugging away at them until you find that you have some sort of password that fills in all of those variables. And when you do, then you're good to go and you can fill out the rest of the information like you would on any other form. So that's it when you're registering. Once you click on register for an account, then you're going to be taken over to the home page again, and you're going to see your name up here on the corner, which indicates that it was successful and things went well. If for some reason, registration or not, if you're going through this tool and you have a question, you're not really sure why things are the way they are, there are two places you can go. The first is the Contact Us link, which is right up here, always at the top near the center. And the second is the forum, which is your access to anybody else using MessageWorks. And so I look at that. Every user who registers on MessageWorks can look at that forum. And so if they have insight to share, they can help you out with possibly some common problems. But for now, you can see I've already signed in. We're going to jump into the tool. When you start MessageWorks, you're going to be presented with the home page. And at this point, there are two main navigational panes that you want to pay attention to. The first, which is with you throughout the entire process, is this top bar. And these are a series of links that connect you to the critical functions of MessageWorks. You're going to be creating a lot of messages. There's no limit to the number of messages you can create on this tool. But there are differences on where the messages go. So you can start out with having a message that's personal, that isn't shared with anybody at all. It could be just an idea that you had that you want to test out. It could be a series of ideas that you just want to compare. But you're really not interested in creating a team and sharing this anywhere. You just want to get some quick feedback, get in, get a report, get out. And My Messages is going to be the place where all those personal messages are kept. But if you work within a team and you want to involve your team in a similar process, so you all look at this message within the same context and print out the report and bring the findings to your next meeting and say, look, we've all used the same variables. We've all thought about this the same way. So right off the bat, we have a common ground that we can start going forward with when we talk about improving communication. What variables do we need to tweak? What ones do we need to add? We've already hit the core, which what MessageWorks' research algorithm is identified, but there are other variables that we might want to consider, such as fear, or such as other factors that are very common, like, say, religion, things that might make a big difference for your particular audience that you want to consider. For those team messages, that's what you'll find in the team section. You can create any number of teams, and teams are only specific to the people that you invite. So if I share a message with a team that's both Dr. Keller and I, then Dr. Keller and I are the only ones who can see the messages that we create in that environment. It doesn't get shared anywhere else until I invite someone else in a team. But if you are really proud of the work that you're doing, if you have a message example that's stellar, that has a good score that you want to release to the broader community on MessageWorks, and therefore increase your visibility, increase the chance that someone else is going to see your work and communicate with you and ask you questions, because they shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel if they don't have to, then the community link is where you're going to want to go. And when you go to the community link, you're going to see two forum options. The first is general forum. So remember way back when I said that if you had a question, you can click on the forum and it'll take you to a place where you can post a question. That's where you're going to post your questions. There is in the MessageWorks general forum. However, in that example that I gave where you had a stellar message that you want to share with individuals, we also give you the opportunity of sharing that message in as much detail and as little detail as you want on the MessageWorks message bank. So if you have an archive of messages that you want to least let people know are out there so that you can get credit for the work that you're doing. You can, if I'm interested in a topic that you have already worked on, I could share my thoughts on what I'm thinking of, and you can give me some feedback. Those kinds of conversations happen by contributing your messages into the message bank. And you'll see that we have some examples, and we actually have a couple from other university situations where they have an example where they looked at bacteria rates in bags and whether or not there's a messaging campaign that could address those issues. Do you use a recycle-friendly bag, or do you just keep throwing things in the trash? Or, for example, gynecologic cancer from the CDC, their Be Brave, Ask Questions campaign for inside knowledge. If I was working with gynecologic cancer, I could see, well, the CDC was the source for this message. In this case, I posted it, but if you actually posted it as content, I could communicate with you, and we can start a collaboration going. So that second word that Dr. Keller mentioned in terms of why MessageWorks is effective, the collaborate, this is your area for engaging other individuals who you might not have ever had any contact with and working together to create better messages. So that's all contained within this community link here. The last link here is called Learning, and as it suggests, it's your platform for not only learning more about the tool in general and the background of how to create an effective message, but those 10 variables that Dr. Keller mentioned are all listed here, and the videos that the one point that I will disagree with Dr. Keller is it really is a pleasure watching her on this video, so she doesn't have to worry about that. But not only do you get to see her talking, but you also get to see examples, coding tips, and strategies for improving the way you code, in this case on the variable of age, but on any of those variables that Dr. Keller mentioned in her part of the presentation. And so if you go to any of these variables, you'll be given an opportunity to test your coding skills. And what that is, actually I'm going to show you, is referencing these links at the bottom of this learning section. And they're flashcard activities, which lets you take those variables to take, for example, health goal A, which is looking at whether or not you're encouraging healthy behavior or discouraging unhealthy behavior, and compare it to a sample message. In this case, we have one from the CDC campaign for flu protection, and identify, does this message seem to be encouraging healthy behavior or discouraging? And in this case, we'll say, okay, I think that's encouraging because it's recommending that I get my flu vaccine and protecting people. And what you'll see is this check mark. Yes, you actually thought of it in the way that a very experienced coder would think of it. And not only that did you get it correctly, but this is why I got it correctly, or this is why that recommendation was made to encourage healthy behavior. So as you go through all those variables, you can test and see if you're in a university setting, not only does it become a great teaching tool of how well you can code, how well you can understand these message tactics and apply them to a message, but if you're going to be using this for your own campaigns, you can make sure that you're coding accurately and getting the most value out of the tool, because you're understanding these concepts. It reinforces what research has found to be effective at improving intentions and behavior. So all that's available to you in this learning section, which is a really exciting resource. But most of you are going to be jumping right into wanting to see how your message ranks, compared to the algorithm. So what I'm going to take you to is that second navigation pane, which is down here at the home screen. So if you sign in, you go to MessageWorks, you get here. But if you're anywhere else, you can click on the home button, and it takes you back to your main screen. And this second pane down here is where you start your process of evaluating a message. MessageWorks lets you deal with a concept. So if you are just starting off and you want to you have an idea that you dreamt of last night and you just want to test it out. You don't really want to share it with anybody yet, but you want to see if it makes sense in terms of what research would indicate. Craft a new message is where you're going to start. If you already have a campaign started or you already have a message that's out there, assess an existing message is where you'd want to go to evaluate what other audiences might have an interest in this type of message. And when you get through this process multiple times, you're going to have a list of personal messages, of team messages, and all of those can be viewed in the My Works. It's your main index for everything that you've worked on. And the Learn More section is something we just went over, so if you ever have questions, you can click on it down here too. We make it very accessible. For this presentation, I'm only going to focus on craft a new message because the process is similar, and the craft a new message takes you through more of the steps and gets you a broader experience. So when you log on to this when you click onto that process, you're going to see that there are 7 steps. And actually, I'm going to take a step back because this is how it looks when you craft a new message, but I've actually already done this once before for the HIV/AIDS campaign. And so when you are returning, or if you're crafting a new, you'll see that your title appears up here, Know Where You Stand, Know My Truth, which is a gay and bisexual African American men campaign at improving testing rates for HIV/AIDS. You'll be given the opportunity to go through this linear process that provides feedback, and eventually, by going through these 6 steps, you'll get those scores that Dr. Keller mentioned. So in 10 minutes, not even, I could go through and answer the relevant questions, and I can generate a score on a message concept that I was thinking of just 10 minutes before. And I can see that research would indicate that in this case, 73% of an audience paying attention to this message would change their intentions in some way. It could be smaller, it could be large, but there will be some sort of change in their intentions to behave. And in this case, since it's HIV/AIDS, it would be in testing behavior. They might consider to talk to their doctor about it. They might consider to bring it up with a friend. They might consider to look at ads in a paper. The estimated behavior score, like Dr. Keller mentioned, is a translation of that score into what you could expect a particular population to act on those intentions. And in this case, 27% would be expected to take some sort of action. You actually pick up the magazine to look at the ads for testing, or you might actually engage in a conversation with your partner, or you might go and look for something online. So what you can see is that right away, 10 minutes, you have 2 scores that can help you identify whether or not this concept is one that might work well, but also how you can improve it. One of the ways you can see the potential opportunity to improve your ability to increase the return on investment are these 2 scores over here. The first one, this 99, suggests that given my audience, saying that everything that you've coded for your audience is static, I have a mandate and we can't change who we're targeting. In this case with the HIV/AIDS campaign, they're targeting African American, gay, bisexual men. So we know this. But if you could change the message tactics that Dr. Keller mentioned, the emotion, the vividness, the referencing, the gain or loss framing around this message topic, I might be able to increase my score from a 73 to a 99, which is a pretty big jump. So if there's some sort of recommendation from research that I have to improve the score, I can avoid not taking those steps early on. I can include that before I bring it to my audience and have a better message idea going forward. And then the opposite scenario that's provided here with 83 looks at the reverse scenario. If I already have a message out there, which, for example, this HIV/AIDS campaign already has messages out there, I can't really change what the message is because it's already been published. But I could change who I give that message to. And so in that case, given my message tactics are static, I could change the steps, the responses that I give for my audience, and if it relates to the topic and the campaign I'm going to be engaging in, I might be able to increase the score up to 83 from 73. So other audiences might respond at the same level or better to this style of message. And in this case, if the recommendation was to engage an all-female audience, well then, maybe that's not what the campaign's aims and mission was, but other recommendations might be valid towards getting to that 83% and, like we mentioned, returning your investment on the time you're spending on these messages. So when you get these scores, the recommendations that are provided are just down below. So if you scroll down, you'll be able to see, well, in this case, the population that you're considering, the different age category and the race category and the gender category would suggest that maybe you should consider a discouraging unhealthy behavior instead of an encouraging healthy behavior. Maybe you should target a detection behavior versus prevention or treatment. So if these are applicable to the mission of to the strategy of your campaign, then use them and see if you can improve this initial idea to something better. You can use this tool to improve your process. And not only that, but you can also share those great improvements with others. When you get those scores, the second option that you have down here is to print out a report. So you can really quickly go in there in 10 minutes, run in there, get your score, click on this export to PDF, and it'll pop up a nice little diagram of everything that you typed in, the average age, the gender breakdown, the race breakdown, what you want your audience to know, feel, and do, and also the scores, what you got. So this message example is 73%. and I have 27% as a behavioral score. I could do this multiple times and compare them side by side, 1, 2, 3, and I can see, well, this one scored 73, this one over here scored 80, and the other one scored 60. So maybe the one that scored 80 is where we should start our focus. When we go to our audience, maybe we should start there. So you can see where this tool provides you immediate feedback to increase the ability of your ranking of a message, to see which ones you might want to start with, to see which ones might make the best impact. And if you go through this process and you like it, you can very easily, everything's saved as you go, you can go back to your main area where you keep your personal messages, and I could share those with team members. I could create a team, and I can share this with the team and say, hey, I just went through this process with the Know My Truth campaign. I like what it's showing me. Can you go through it with me, and we can collaborate to increase the value of this process, to have everybody on the same page. So when we have that next meeting, I have to explain it to you. You know what we were looking at, and we can talk to each other. So the steps that you go through to get that are something that we could spend a lot of time on, but I'm just going to really quickly give you like one sentence on each. The instructions just give you what you need to know to get started. The message background is where you have your title and your problem, you have the goals and what you want your audience to know, feel, and do, things that are relevant if you want to think through the process of who am I engaging, why am I engaging, what dissemination channels am I considering, what are the barriers that I'm going to experience. Going through this with other people, oftentimes I've done, it's really insightful to see the light bulbs start to click when they have to answer, what do you want your audience to feel? Well, I never thought about that. They're actually kind of nervous about getting tested because of stigma, because, oh, okay, and these light bulbs just occur where you see how you can focus the campaign a little bit more specifically on what your population has said are issues, and it helps you get everything on paper, which I'm sure you do in any situation, but if you wanted to use this as a learning tool, it's a really great way of reinforcing those steps that you should take. Step 3 is your audience variables, and so this is the first of the first 4 of those 10 that Dr. Keller mentioned. So you'll fill those out, and then when you do, you're going to get recommendations right off the bat on ways that you can select health messaging tactics to get the best impact based on what the research would recommend. So discouraging unhealthy behavior, those ones that we saw at the end, we reiterate this so that you have some chance to familiarize yourselves with those concepts. So you'll take consider of these recommendations. You'll attach any examples of the images or thoughts or meeting notes. You can leave a message to your team for if you want to share it later on, then they'll be able to see these notes that you leave. And then you can go into the message tactics where you go through those remaining 6 variables that Dr. Keller mentioned. For example, the health goal, gain-loss framing, referencing, and then score these questions based on your concept. So, in terms of the HIV/AIDS campaign, I would think that we're trying to promote testing, so we're encouraging a healthy behavior. Check. And you just go down the line. And at the end, you get those 2 scores that we mentioned, which, I just blazed right through there, but if you just dealt with the target audience and code my message and the messaging tactics, you can get in and out of there in relatively little time and then print out your report and bring it to your team. So that is probably the fastest I can go without it getting too confusing. I know there's a lot more we could cover, and so if there are any questions after this presentation while you're using this tool, again, I reinforce that you can go to the Contact Us link up here and go to the forum link to post a question on our forum, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So with that, I'm going to open up to questions, and we'll see what you can come up with. So right now what I'm looking at is the list of questions that were asked in the question spot. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to see which ones we've answered and which ones that we haven't. Okay, so the first question that I see on here is a clarification, Dr. Keller, on whether or not MessageWorks is useful for awareness campaigns. What would you respond to that?
I would say MessageWorks can help you increase your awareness, but we have no formal way of testing that. So it was a big leap of faith on my part. I'm assuming that awareness is a precursor or a prerequisite for higher intention scores and behavior change scores, but we don't have an awareness score. So what I would do is in your place, I would test that. I would say you have two messages, one that's designed according to the recommendation in MessageWorks, one that may be based on some other insights and formulas, and I would test those and see which one works better. And my key measure, of course, would be awareness, and see either you could come back and answer the question for us, because we don't have empirical data on that. We don't have a predictive awareness score. So, of course, the caveat here is that you cannot say for sure that this is an objective score that you will get for awareness as you could for intentions and behavior change. A priori, you couldn't say that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Keller. The next question we have relates to how MessageWorks calculates the recommendations, the coding and scoring. And so for those of you who want to dig a little deeper into what we use to build the algorithm that Dr. Keller and Dr. Lehmann mentioned, right now what I've done is I've taken you over to the HealthCommWorks homepage. And if you look at this MessageWorks button and you scroll down, you'll see this link right here about MessageWorks. When I click that, there is an option actually to scroll down, and you'll see that we've included right here the link to the article, the meta-analysis article that Dr. Keller and Dr. Lehmann wrote in 2008, which serves as the basis for all the calculations and the recommendations that we make. So if you have a question from a team, where are these coming from? Someone just think these up. No, these are all based on research findings from 40 years worth of research, looking from 1960 to 2006 about, and using a very strict method of study selection. So if you look at that article, it should give you that and more to be able to answer some of those questions. Let's see. So another question that we have is whether or not MessageWorks is appropriate for crisis and emergency-related messages. And Dr. Keller, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say yes. Actually, one of the best advantages of MessageWorks is how fast you can use it. So if crisis means you have to make decisions in a hurry, I would say the tool has an advantage over a more common discussion on how to design the message. So if you have some ideas about the target audience that's affected by the crisis, all you have to do is plug that in, get some recommendations for what would be the best tactics to use for that target audience, and run with it.
Yeah, and on that point too, I just want to also emphasize that, especially for crisis communication, there's tools that I've been familiar with, like message mapping and other techniques that you could use MessageWorks right alongside with. So I don't think I would ever say that it would be the only tool you'd use, but I'm sure for the person who asked the question that you have already established processes for creating effective ones, but MessageWorks can work right into there. So yeah, if you have a good example of it.
That's true, by the way. Yeah, it's true for CD Synergy as well as other procedures and tools you're using.
Yeah, that's a great question. Our next one is, do you need to go through each step? And that's an awesome question, and thankfully the answer is no. The only steps that you're required to fill out to get to your score are steps 3 and step 6. And you fill out your target audience calculations and you fill out your message tactic calculations, and that gives the algorithm everything it needs to generate a score. What I will say though, so if you're just short for time and you want to run through it, that's why I said in no time flat you can go through step 3, step 6, and then run. But what I will say is I've found that people definitely have a benefit for going through this background section, and if you're going to share it at a later date or you want your team to understand some of the background details, because at least from other workshops that we've held, we found that oftentimes you'll have an idea, you'll be introduced to an initiative, and then you'll create an idea, and then you'll need to share it with your expanded team. they might not have all the background information on what you're talking about. And so filling out some of these background details might be a good way to start introducing that to them. And then also grounding it in how they would try to take it a step further. So, before your opinions are heard, how would other people approach the problem, and what kind of concepts would they think about? So I would encourage people to not skip over step 2, but if you really just want the score, you should just navigate to the target audience and code my message parts, and you can jump right over to the score. So it's a good question. Let's see. Okay. How do I search for messages someone else may have created? Another great question. Going back to the security feature, if you have, I'll take this in 3 parts. The first part is if you have a personal message. If your messages are personal and you haven't shared them with a team or the community, nobody can find them. So they're private to you. I know that clearance is often an issue, so you don't have to worry about someone else discovering this. We can't see what's going on. It really is something where your messages are private to you, and someone else couldn't search for your private messages. If you introduce the messages to a team, then the people who could find those messages are anybody who's in your team. So once they're shared in a team, so for example, say you're part of a team and you're working on a series of messages, your MyWorks section right here, which is that index of all your messages, private and shared, is where you could search for those messages. And here I'll show you what that looks like. You see you'll have this little search for my messages command, and then you can search team messages down here. So you can see that I have a couple, well, actually quite a few, team messages, and then I have these ones that are private that nobody else can see. And so let's see, that's the second part. The third part with this community phase, if I take you over to an example of this HIV/AIDS example that I showed you, there's this link down here. So right now I'm on step 7 within this process. So I'm looking at my score, and right below the reports, there's this link here to share my message on the forum. And when I do that, that's when you can search for anybody's message. So if I've shared my message on the forum, and you can see what that looks like, it gives me the title, it gives me some of the details. If I have any attachments, it'll send the attachments. All of that, by the way, can be edited by using this edit link. So I could have it only show a certain part. I could take away some of this stuff. So you can share what you want. But once you put it on the forum, then it is viewed by everybody. So if you're interested in sharing, then I would suggest that you click on that link down here on step 7, share my message on the forum, and display it for everyone else. But that's the only way that anybody else on the system could actually find the message that you're working on. Hopefully that was clear. Okay. Let's see. So keep going. A lot of good questions. Okay, so one of the questions is, can you talk a little bit more about the team aspect of developing a message to distribute? Okay, so what I'll do just in 2 minutes is I'll just show you what it looks like. If I go over to Teams, you'll see that I already have a list of teams developed, but if I click on this Create a New Team link, what I'll be presented with is a spot for me to name my team, so I can have test here, test team 2. And I can say, well, there might be someone else on here. For example, I know one of my colleagues is on. So I can type in her username, which I know from being on MessageWorks, or I can type in her email if she's not on yet, and I can invite. And when that happens, they list here on the invitations, and that person could join my team and participate. So then you'll see that this is now part of my collection of teams, and when I go into that, you'll see that you'll have the opportunity to craft a new message or assess existing, and that's the same set of processes, same set of steps that you just went through personally. It's just right now I'm in a team setting, so when I would actually create a message, I'll have those messages listed down here, and that's how I can tell they're part of this team, and Eileen could see that, or anybody else that we invite. So what actually ends up happening then is when I have a team message, let me go to one that we do have. Let's see, maybe this one has someone attached. Is you'll see that each member I invite, so you have different people, actually can view the same process, and I as an organizer can see the results. So there's a couple of peculiarities and differences that lets me see the consensus among my group of what kind of tactics would they choose to express this message concept. So in that way you can collaborate and see, before you even get in the meeting, we can say, okay, well, I know this person is thinking of a discouraging unhealthy behavior. Let's think about mocking up a couple examples. What were the scores? Maybe we should go with a couple of options. So you can see where it brings people together and lets you see their responses in tandem, and then also lets you, if you want, you can share notes here, which is all part of the report that you can generate. So it really is a neat way to start building your collaborations with other individuals. What I will say is we have maybe time for one more question, because I know it's getting to 2 o'clock. And the question is that if you didn't have the chance to join this webinar, if you know someone who might enjoy it, is there going to be a recorded version, or what is going to be available? And what I can say to that is we will have recorded versions available at some point. We need to figure that out a little bit further, but what I can say is that I will send the slides that we just used to everybody who's registered, and you can share those with whomever you want. So you don't have to request that. I'll just blast that out within the end of the week. And outside of that, I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for all your excellent questions. If you have anything else that you want to ask, I'll be on the forum. The Contact Us link is always valid. And I thank you for your time. I can't wait to see what you do with this tool. And Dr. Keller, thank you for giving us your time today.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, webinar participants.
For sure. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.